If there's anyone who knows weddings down to the littlest details, it's Shelley Keim. She is a professional flower preservationist, wedding day detail stylist, maker of curated wedding gift boxes, and owner of a creative studio in the West Village Arts District of Greenville, South Carolina. Previously a wedding planner, Shelley currently runs several businesses in which she uses her wedding know-how and artistry to serve a variety of clients in the industry. And I'm so excited to have her here today with me. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you used to be a wedding planner, but now you have shifted your focus to beautiful gift boxes and flower preservation. Can you tell us a little bit more about your businesses and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I was a full service wedding planner and designer for about 6 years with my company. And throughout that, discovered that I really, really love the small details that go into a wedding and the thoughtfulness behind everything and the memories that get created through that. So while I was with my clients, I would offer additional services and they would take me up on it. And that kind of grew me out of the planning side of things and into more of the detail services. So I have two companies that grew from that, which is the Proper Box. And then I also have the Proper Petal. So the Proper Box is a curated gifting service that is for weddings, for hotel check-ins. You can provide them as favors at the wedding. We also do wedding gifting for the wedding party. And then a service after the wedding, which is really important because you don't get to take too much with you after, is the Proper Petal. And that is a preservation service for your bridal bouquet. So I dry the flowers and preserve them in a frame, and it can be hung at your home after as a way to remember the day.
Yes. And for those of you listening, Shelley was my sister's wedding planner and she was fantastic. And Caitlin took you up on the detail and the boxes and the flower preservation. My sister and I have used Shelley numerous of times and she is fantastic. So you guys definitely want to check her out. But one thing is you really have an eye for design and it shines in your boxes and in the way that you lay out your flowers and the preservations, but you also do an amazing job at designing events. So what advice would you give to those brides listening that are trying to design their dream wedding and get all of the linens, the florals, the favors, etc., to be cohesive? Because I find that often people look at Pinterest and different things online, and then when they try to do it in real life, it just doesn't happen the way that they want. So what would you suggest? Because you definitely have an eye for it.
Yeah, I would definitely say when you get to the design phase, which is typically not the first thing you do, it's usually the most exciting part. But if you're the person that has decided, I have the time to do my own wedding, I want to figure out the design, I have organized myself, I have the budget created, and now it's time for the design phase, that my 3 tips to get cohesive look and feel is to create a few lists. So the first list I would say would be creating keywords and just kind of figuring out how do you want your wedding to feel, and that will translate into design. So maybe it's, I want my wedding to be romantic, I want it to be elegant, I want it to feel soft, I want it to be memorable, I want it to be formal. Then you can kind of take those words and take it a step further and make another list of what does that mean to you. So maybe romantic is candlelight and formal is a sit-down dinner. And then maybe the elegance and the softness is sheers and drapery. And maybe it brings the color white to your mind or soft blush or whatever that may be. Then you're kind of getting to that design phase. And that's going to start bringing the look together and the experience you want. So that's always my tip, is to start with the feeling and using all those senses to create the design. Other than that, I would say to create a priority list to make sure what are the things you have to have, and then kind of create a wish list after that. The services I create are not necessarily needs, they're more wishes. So it's hard for me to say, don't do it right away, but it is important that you get what you must have first, and to go ahead and invest in maybe rentals. Sit down dinner, you need tables and chairs, you need linens. Off of that budget that you've created, you can then decide what rentals in that world can I go ahead and have and secure those right away. I think a mistake often is if you're working with your caterer and they're doing the rental orders for you, they're going to say, let's just wait until like 3 months out to go ahead and get that list. And that's a big chunk of your budget. So I would say try to do it yourself or encourage your caterer to get at least a proposal together so you know what you're securing and the costs associated. So maybe you want a certain chair, but it's a little out of budget right now. Then go ahead and secure something that you can have and maybe put on hold the nicer chairs. I always think the bigger statement pieces are more important than the small details. So like a really pretty linen can go a long way. A really nice chair can go a really long way as far as aesthetics, because you might have 100 of those as to oppose like a small little table design. So that would be my other tip is create that wish list, create that word, that vocab of what you want your wedding to feel, and then get your rentals secured sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense. And like the word that's just coming to mind as you're talking is like strategy. Is I think that a lot of people are like, oh, this is pretty and this is pretty. And they see a bunch of different pictures online. And when they just try to throw it all together, it doesn't turn out the way that they want because there really was no kind of strategy behind it. And I like what you said about like, pick your word of like, do you want it to be a romantic feel? Because if you like a bunch of different things from a bunch of different types of design or category, like it probably won't come together as well as people hope. So let's talk gift boxes. You do welcome boxes, favors, and what should people be planning? Well, like people who are planning a wedding, what should they know about gifting and boxes? Because they might not like, it might not be one of the first thing that comes to mind, but it does play a big role in weddings.
Yeah, it definitely might not be something right off your vendor list of a gifting company or maybe doing it yourself. But along the way, I think you then are like, what am I missing? And then favors come to mind. So gifting to me is extremely important. It's a really special way to put a personalized touch on the day and to touch each guest personally, as opposed to maybe just doing like the typical, I don't know, favors that you're just finding on Pinterest that everyone else is doing. You can actually sit down and think, well, what do I want to do that connects to the wedding, and gift that to whether it's, you know, your rehearsal dinner guests and special to them, or you're gifting something per couple, or sitting at the dinner table settings for each guest. It's just a way to communicate a thank you with a tangible item that they can either enjoy right there and then. Food is always really fun to do, and they can enjoy a snack a little extra at the wedding itself, or bring something home to remember the day by.
I loved at my sister's wedding, like I felt like the favors at the wedding served so many different purposes because they were on the table. They looked so cute and aesthetically pleasing. They went with the design. But then it was food. So people were enjoying it. It wasn't something that they like threw away or put on the shelf and never looked at again. I know everybody on the bus ride home was like eating it, but it was, I think she had like chocolate covered espresso beans or like a few other things that was also like, that's one of her favorites. So it was like special to her, useful and aesthetically pleasing. And I just loved how you tied all of that together.
Yeah. Going back to design for Caitlin and Joe, like it was just a small box. It wasn't anything that was overwhelming to the table itself. It fit really pretty with the place setting, and it was functional in the sense that we made the gift tags their place cards. So it had the names where the guests could find their table and then find their seat. And then it was tagged onto the gift box, which were both their favorite chocolates. So it was, I think, chocolate covered, like a chocolate covered nut, and then a chocolate covered espresso bean, 2 little boxes stacked with ribbon. Yeah. And then their name tags for each guest.
I forgot that it was the name tag as well. So it served like it was functional, it was aesthetically pleasing, it was meaningful. Like I just loved how it really tied together. So another part of boxes that you do is the welcome box. And I tried to do the welcome boxes myself because I'm in Florida. I'm not in your state. So at first I was like, Shelley can't help me. Like it's far away. And I was like, I'm going to do it myself. And I tried to order boxes, but you know, it's not my job. So I don't have like a wholesale place to really get them. And long story short, it was a nightmare. I tried to I spent so much money trying to order all these things, trying to decide what to go in it, and it just didn't work. And I finally returned everything that I could return, just took my losses and cried out to you. I was like, "Shelley, please help me." So tell me about these welcome boxes. How do you decide what to go in them? How do you make them so perfect?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I loved the box we created for you. And when you reached out, of course, I love your family so much. So I was definitely going to be there. But you had great ideas to contribute. So that's really where we start, is we kind of talk through the wedding vision. What was the theme? Where was your location? What were you already thinking of including? And then getting a fresh perspective from me to come in and kind of tie it off. Or if you have no clue as a client, we can start from scratch and I can build some designs. But we had a head start with yours and they were beautiful. So it really, the purpose of the gift box service, along with having a planner, is they're just doing things that you would normally do, but doing it for you. So I took the time off your hands to go ahead and figure out ideas, present them, go ahead and purchase the product, package the product, and then we ship them to you in Florida to bring. So it's really just a time relief, and then just getting a really creative person to come in and make it unique to you and help you out there. So the proper box has been a really fun service for me to offer, as I love the details and not everyone does. And I love making sure that equally inside the box is just as important as the presentation and what it looks like at the beginning. So when you're talking about a hotel welcome box, it really is the first impression your guest will have of the wedding weekend. They arrive, they get to the hotel and check in, and the front desk gives them this beautiful, curated, rigid gift box. And it's probably not expected by the guest. And it's the first thing they open and get to experience for the wedding. And there's a custom note inside thanking them. Maybe there's an itinerary or a map to help them or remind them of the ceremony time, whatever it is you want to include. And then there's fun products that they can enjoy. Typically something they can enjoy now, and then something they can enjoy later, and then usually a little something they can take with them home to remember the day by. But it's curated, so it's really up to what you want and the feel you want to give your guests.
Yeah, I remember for mine, we worked together on it. I kind of came to you of hey, my venue it looked like Italy. So we were kind of playing on this Italian vibe, and then you came in with some great ideas. And yeah, I loved the box, and you put this gorgeous ribbon on it that was the same color as my bridesmaids' dresses. So there was function and design and everything pulled together. It was great. So something else that you have done, you've helped us in so many ways. We touched on it a little earlier, but my sister and I both have our bridal bouquets beautifully preserved, and they're both on display in our homes. And it's so special. I see my bridal bouquet every single day. My mom has a piece of mine as well.
Yeah.
So does my mother-in-law. So tell us about your flower preservation business, and what should brides know about this?
Yeah. So a lot of my businesses stem from just a need. So the proper box was a need for gifting, and the proper petal was really started as a need for table numbers. I was working with my clients and decided that the table numbers they were never the perfect scale. You buy them from the store, get them printed, and they're too big or too small. So I'm just going to make some in inventory. And the material acrylic was really popular then. So I was like, well, maybe I can press some flowers in it. And that got me thinking about asking my brides for some flowers after the wedding day I could use. And so it rolled into, well, what are you doing with your bridal bouquet after the wedding? And the first bride I asked, she was like, I honestly never thought of that. I don't know. What should I do with it? And so I asked if I could take it home and take some extra flowers to play with, and I'll preserve her bridal bouquet for her in exchange for her letting me have some extras. So that started and worked out, and she was so happy and excited that she could keep a piece of her wedding day, the most important flowers she had, her bouquet. And that got out really quickly that I was offering this service, and it just naturally became a business. So it's transitioned in look, and I figured out, the best way to preserve. And I have an art and design background. So I really wanted to make it look like a piece of art and not just flatten the flowers, keep them, looking as alive and full as possible, as soft as possible, and layering. So I created a shadow box, and there's a design element that the bride could choose from, in the sense of like, what colors do I want? Do I want a gold frame or a white frame, or keep it natural wood? And so they get to pick, but the overall look is a 3D shadow display box that they can hang on their wall. And if they give me enough flowers, we can certainly extend it into gifting and sharing with moms or bridesmaids as a thank you gift. I've even done duo sets, so 2 pieces next to each other for the bride herself. So yeah, that's kind of how the proper petal was born, and it's been a huge success. And I love knowing that I'm one of the services that a bride gets to keep and look at every day, beyond her photos and maybe her wedding dress. It's one of the few tangible items.
Well, I guess you can. Some people have photos on the wall. I haven't gotten there quite yet with my wedding photos. I have one, but
you will.
I will. But my flowers are right in my living room. I see them every day. And when I say like that my mom has a piece, my mother-in-law has a piece, for those listening, like my bouquet was pretty big. And so I had probably more flowers than would fit in this shadow box for the size I picked. And so I had Shelley make, I think 3 or 4 of these. I think my sister has one of them too.
She does. Yeah.
I think I have a big one for me. And then I had her make me like 3 smaller ones for my mom, my sister, and my mother-in-law. So they all have a piece of my bridal bouquet, which is, I don't know, it's just really special. And that day goes by so fast. So it's nice to have something to hold on to, and the flowers look beautiful. Like you did a great job making them look like alive and beautiful. But that was another thing of, at first, because you're far away, I didn't necessarily think about like my flower preservation right off the bat. I knew my sister had done it, and I was like, I don't know, I'll figure something out. And then like after the wedding, I remember, I think I was on my honeymoon. My mom's texting me like, I have your bouquet. Like, what are we doing? And I was like, I don't know, send it to Shelley. Like,
yeah,
not everybody thinks about what you're going to do with your flowers. And it's just a great way. I definitely suggest to any brides, just lock it in before the wedding day, have that plan, and get your flowers preserved, because it's great to hold on to them. All right. So we touched a little bit earlier on like making your wedding come cohesive, the design together. So what are your 3 design tips for the wedding reception?
Yeah. So I have a few. Probably have lots, but my top 3 that hopefully maybe you've never heard before, brides out there, would be, first one would be, and these probably come from pet peeves as well, being 6 years in design and then 6 years as a venue coordinator before that. You see lots of things and you learn. And so this is hopefully great advice if you tend to lean into the direction of lighting or obviously your rental list. So first one would be lighting. It's probably my biggest peeve, is if things get hung too high or too low. So there really are standards in rentals, and sometimes you would hope your rental company would guide you or know, and sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. So hang lighting lower than you think. Is always consider your photos. If you go online and look, you'll probably realize, oh my God, that chandelier is hung too high above the table. Like, think of it, if you're having dinner in your dining room, where is the light sitting on the table? Consider that. If you're obviously walking down the aisle to something, you want to make sure it's taller than the tallest person, but again, still being seen in photos. So with that would be my lighting tip. But also use lighting, if this is a budget trick too, use lighting if it's necessary. Some venues it's just added for fun, but if it's functional and it's pretty great, but market lights right now are kind of like still in trend, but not quite. If you do use them, it's great to fill like gaps in really tall ceilings. So maybe in mills, but again, hang them lower so you get the most out of the budget you put into them, so they don't vanish in your photos.
Interesting.
Yeah, it took me a while to learn this myself, because you're like, oh, that light is probably too low. You don't want it to be, in the eyes of your guests to chat, but it's just like a chandelier in your dining room. You want it hung a certain height above the table to glow and to get in those photos. So photos are always so important to me. I think of that always, like, what's it going to look like in the photo, and the scale and the position of everything.
I think like, I don't know. I always hear my mom saying like high ceilings make the room look bigger, but the ceilings can be high and make the room look bigger, but like the lighting doesn't have to be all the way up there. It's just something like you might not think of, but it is a very good point. And even at home, like my husband, if he stands up, his head would probably hit our light fixture, but it's over the table. So he's not like walking under it. I'm short, so I don't have that problem, but no, that's a good tip that like most people probably aren't thinking about.
Yeah, I would say that's a big one for me, is just like or in a tent and you look, you're like, oh my God, that chandelier is closer to the top of the tent than it is to the guests. And it's like you would hope the crew hanging it would know, but they really don't. So like my next big tip would be have a committed team that's going to be able to know that and be there for the vendors day of, to guide them, because there'll always be questions. You may choose to design the wedding, but a day of, you want to make sure all of those goals and things you worked really hard on are going to be done for you. And you'll need a really committed team, whether it's friends or family or whoever that are. And I would say team, like not just like one person, but usually if you have a planner, they'll have a team or they'll bring people in or work with the vendors really closely. So you'll still want that, and to have that goal kind of transferred over to them, and they'll make sure all the questions get answered on your wedding day and executed the way you want them to be executed.
Mm-hmm. That is something like in my program that I talk about, is whether you have a like full wedding planner or not, you need to have someone responsible the day of. If it's a planner, great. If it's a day of coordinator, great. If it's nobody, that if you're not hiring somebody, if that's not in the budget, you need to have somebody who knows the plan that's responsible for it. And it cannot be the bride the day of the wedding.
Yeah. And honestly, like not even a key guest of yours, somebody that's going to have to like be on a time frame. I got to go change to make the wedding. Really just somebody that maybe didn't make the guest list, but is close enough to you that you trust, like neighbors or friends of friends that they can recruit in, so that they can commit the time and not be having to leave. Because if you book a planner, they're there all day, right? So they're there from the first one in and usually the last one out. So you kind of want to run that model off of your team as well.
Yeah, it can't be.
That often gets forgotten, the back end, right? All the flowers, like who's carrying the flowers out? Or is the florist coming back? Or did we buy them in their hours? And who's loading up the truck? And where is the truck at the end of the night? That's important.
Yeah. One of my best friends was a bridesmaid at another wedding. And I actually know the bride as well. I talked to her about this, and it was one of her, like, if I could go back. She was a very DIY bride and had like all of the stuff for her reception for the tables. She bought it herself and had it just like in a closet at home. And she figured out how, I think her husband, like the groom, brought everything the morning of the wedding to the place. And then someone came in and was like, who's setting up the table? And the bride was just like deer in the headlights, like, I thought you guys would do it. And they were like, this venue was like kind of a shell venue. They didn't have a whole staff. And like the staff who was there had no idea what the bride wanted. So the bridesmaids, who were already like in the middle of getting dressed, hair and makeup was being done, they had to run out, set up the entire reception.
Oh no.
They also were like, wait, what do you want this to look like? So the bride herself went and did a table for the bridesmaids to copy. And I think it ended up okay, but it was stressful. And my friend who was a bridesmaid was like, I felt disheveled, like going into the ceremony, because I had just been setting up the reception and it just was not how the wedding day should go. So in my book, I have a chapter of like, not only have a plan, but everybody needs to know the plan. There needs to be designated people to help you, whether it's a full-time planner, a day of coordinator, or somebody who's not a key person of your wedding party or your family that can just be there to help work and make sure everything flows well.
Yeah. And your book guiding you and probably doing these like, oh, I never thought of that moments like that. Really, that's going to happen. So use resources, get the programs, read the books, and you're going to find like, oh yeah, I didn't think of this, and you'll get it done. And then the goal is not to be the bride that didn't think of that and have these emergencies on the wedding day. Cause you can definitely DIY a wedding. And I don't want my tips to be anything that's like saying that you need a full service wedding planner or anything. It's just definitely need to be an organized bride and kind of think everything through and reach out for help where you need it for sure. And just know what your vendors are going to do for you. And most importantly, what your vendors are not going to do for you. So you can get that covered.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's very important just to be prepared. Like whether you're hiring a full team, whether you're not hiring a full team, you need to know what to expect and make sure they know what to expect as well. Mm-hmm. So, kind of another hot topic these days, which we touched on a little bit, is favors. Are they in? Are they out? Of all people, my dad sent me an article about wedding favors the other day. Anything wedding that he sees, he's supportive. It's sweet.
Your dad's the best.
He is. So what is your take on this? Are wedding favors in, out? What should brides know? What should they be doing?
Yeah. I think if it's intentional and it means something, it's in, and that goes for anything in your wedding day. Going back to when I was a planner, it was really important that the couple knew, like, if you don't want to do something, don't do it. Maybe you don't want toasts, or you don't want to cut the cake in front of someone, or like anything on your wedding day. Like if it doesn't feel right, let's figure out what does and do that. So that goes with favors as well. Like, is that something that's really important to you? Are you someone that likes to show your appreciation? You like the little extras, you like the things that have meaning, you like to create or at least think up ideas or have someone do it for you so you can have that at your wedding day. And if that's a yes, I think it's in, but don't do anything that you don't want to do. So favors just don't feel right, then maybe there's something else you can do to show your appreciation. But I think favors will always be in. It's just a sign of hospitality. And I think sometimes with trends that can get pushed to the side or lost. And so my service is to be able to bring that back to the table and offer it to brides that just don't want to DIY it, but still have something there.
I agree. I personally think wedding favors are always going to be in. I just think people need to be focused on like what type of favors, because when they have food, everyone likes food. It's such a popular thing. It's a win. And so people don't look at it even like as like, I don't know, unnecessary favors, because they're excited. If someone's excited about it, if it's useful, it's going to be in every single time. Unfortunately, as much as people may, really want to give a bottle opener with their name on it or other things, people aren't going to be as excited about it. Maybe they will, maybe some will, but they might be excited and then it's going to like sit on the shelf or get lost or thrown away. That's where I think favors in general get a bad rap. Not to hate on bottle openers. Some people might love bottle openers, but like
maybe they're wine drinkers and that
maybe
makes sense, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
That would totally make sense to have at the wedding day,
but it's just
it's at a dry wedding and like, why are we getting bottle opener?
Yeah. I just think there are some favors that like give favors in general a bad rap and has made this like, oh, favors are out kind of thing these days, where I disagree. I just think it's the type of favors. Make sure that they're useful.
Yeah, they don't feel like an afterthought. So, setting up just a table where they're grabbing them on the way out, if you do that, make the presentation fun, have someone passing them out, at the same time, rather than just hoping they're going to know what to do. But, more importantly, and what's really fun is to incorporate them into your design. So going ahead and placing them on the table, the guests know it's theirs. They're going to get excited. They're probably going to open it during dinner. They probably will eat it. If it's, a macaroon or whatever, a little tasty treat, they're probably going to eat it at some point during dinner and they're going to enjoy it. So there's definitely ways to do it that, the investment is going to be worth it and the guests will appreciate it at the same time.
I made this mistake at my own wedding. I wanted my favors to be like different. I don't know why. I was like, I want them to be different. And I also had favors at my rehearsal dinner. And at the rehearsal dinner, I had a box of chocolates and everyone got like 4 little chocolates. And then at my actual wedding reception, I had these little trees. And the wedding venue had these like Italian cypress trees. So I had like these little seedling trees and they were cool. And it definitely, like, my plant people were really excited about it. But the majority of people didn't care about the seedling. And to be honest, I planted like 5 or 6 of them that I had left over and they all died. Yeah. But everybody liked those chocolates from the rehearsal dinner. And I wish that I had like switched it because I don't know, I wanted it to be different and something. And in reality, what the guest enjoyed were the chocolates. My father-in-law was like, if you have more, please send them my way.
Yeah. If you have those left over, you won't mind.
Yeah.
But you probably won't because everyone will take
no. The chocolates were absolutely gone. The trees, some people were like, I don't want a tree, and they didn't take it. So learn from my mistake, do meaningful favors that people will want, not just, I don't know. There's so many trends and like trying to be different or extra these days. And I think just do what guests are going to enjoy. So you have lots of experience with weddings. Do you have any horror stories?
There's always, a wedding day will always have stories. And as a planner, you keep them to yourself if you can, so that the day always feels magical. Because it's not necessarily a horror story. It's just a natural thing that'll happen and it gets fixed and you move on. But one of my kind of, I guess, horror stories as a planner would be I had a venue that apparently I learned that day, this happens often, is they just lose power a lot. It's if there's a wind, they're out in the open and power goes out. It was my first time experiencing that. I've been to the venue plenty of times. And so the morning of, we learn the power is out and they're outside on the courtyard with a tent and they have, lights and all the things that require power, and they're catering. The kitchen was out, so they couldn't cook. So it was definitely a need for someone to step into action. And that's where, you get on the phone and you call the rental company and you secure the backup generators before anyone else does, and you get them out there. So the bride was actually staying on site and hair and makeup needed to start soon. So we rushed the power generator out there first to them and got them on hair and makeup. And the bride knew the power was out. Obviously, she was experiencing it in her room, but she didn't realize the extent of what that would cause. But Dad called. He's like, what do you need me to do? And I'm like, Dad, I need you to do nothing but, just get ready. Power generators, backups are coming, and we're going to have lights and we're going to figure it all out. So we got all the lights back on and the guests didn't even know the power was out. The only time you would know is if you went to the bathroom in the restaurant and it was dark in there. We lit some candles, but other than that, the generators were running the lights. I had really good reputation with another outside catering company to the point where I could call them and say, we need food for 100 and something people in a few hours. Here's their existing menu, match it up as much as possible. And they brought in hot food from the outside and plated, like it came in chafing dishes, and we plated it like it was a sit down dinner and it was cooked in the kitchen. And the bride honestly never even knew up until dinner and kind of being served. And she was totally cool with it because she didn't have to deal with it. And it was taken care of. And, it wasn't being substituted by pizza or that was one of those moments. Cause there was definitely talk from people of well, we can order pizza and do sandwiches. And I'm like, no. That is plan D. Yeah. Plan A is we use our connections and we beg and so we called an outside caterer who was amazing, and they didn't even question. They're like, we're going to call our kitchens and we're going to start cooking for you. And they did it.
Amazing.
And up until even to dessert, they were doing affogatos. So that's ice cream and coffee. And of course they couldn't brew coffee. So we went and got coffee down the street hot, and they got their affogatos for dessert. And again, it was as if nothing had happened with the exception of the lights out in the restroom. So that was one of those moments. But as a planner, like, this is the situation we're in. Mm-hmm. What are our options? And it needs to be the best options for the clients first and foremost. So it's funny because I was calling Duke Energy on the phone, and I signed myself up as the venue to get text message alerts when it would be back on, because it was a tree that was down. And of course, you're at the mercy of the crew going out there and fixing it. And so still to this day, this was like 3 years ago, I still get text messages from Duke Energy when their power's out at the venue, because I'm still on their emergency contact list.
When did the power did it ever come back on?
It came back on in the evening, I believe, but because we were going and up and running, we never even knew, like,
had to go to the bathroom to check.
It transitioned so well. Yeah. It transitioned so well. We never even knew when it came back on. Wow.
And it's a perfect example of, like, you just don't know what you don't know. I feel like some of these poor brides just don't know what really goes on, because even if they've been a guest at weddings, like, the guests that day probably thought everything was fine and dandy. Like, yeah, it was great.
It's still like, I see the couple, they're in Greenville, South Carolina. And that's like, remember when, like, our power went out on our wedding? And this couple, this was like their third attempt at planning, because originally they were going to be married in Dominican Republic. And then the storms, or the big, what was it, an earthquake or the tsunami or whatever came through in Dominican Republic, like, took out, like, their destination venue, or the storms, so they couldn't travel. And then they're planning to maybe rebook and figuring out Greenville, and then their house caught on fire, and where everything was safe and everything worked out, but then they had to, like, move out and wedding planning at the same time. So they're like, we're getting married in Greenville, we're hiring a planner, and we're doing this in 3 months. And then, of course, on the wedding day, they lose power. So it's just like a full story that they laugh about now. But they deserve nothing but the best on that day. And those are the things you think about, like, no way, like, there's no way we're just going to let all this happen when they've worked so hard to get here.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what is one piece of advice that you want to give our brides and grooms to be?
My biggest piece of advice is certainly your day. You are the one leading the ship, and you probably have a crew with opinions with you, and to listen to the opinions and always, do what's best for you. But I definitely am the planner that says, consider your wedding party, consider your family, consider your guests, put yourself in their shoes and their perspective. Go back to when you were a guest at a wedding and how you felt when, like, something didn't happen, or when it did, and you're like, wow, they really thought of me then. And so I would say that while it is your day, make sure your decisions are in the best interest of everyone when you can.
Yeah, it's a big commitment to say yes to being a bridesmaid or a groomsman. Mm-hmm. Like, your wedding party is putting a lot in for you. And then, of course, some couples pay for their own wedding, but it is common that family contributes. And so it is, my thing is, like, it's your day, your way. But once you dive into my book and my program, I do talk about, like, it is your day, but if your parents are paying for this wedding, it's partially their day too. So it's just a balance, like, be respectful and make sure that it's an enjoyable day for everybody.
Yeah. And if they do that, like, don't wait for them to come in and interrupt an idea. Ask them on the front end, like, oh, is there anything that you want to see? We're making our wish list, and we want to kind of include y'all. Like, is anything really important to have? Maybe dances, parent dances might be important, or maybe the cake cutting is important to them because it's very traditional. And so, but maybe the couple's like, I really don't want to cut the cake. What's the compromise? And are you willing to do that? Maybe it's not digging the glass and watching everyone look at you cutting the cake, but maybe you tell, the timeline to, we're just going to go off in a quiet moment, make sure the parents are present and they see us cut the cake. There's always a way to think through and make everyone happy. And so ask what their important things are on the front end and make sure you plan with them, and they'll appreciate you just simply asking too.
Yeah. It's such good advice to try to think of everybody.
Yeah.
Well, having you on today has been so fantastic. I'm so appreciative that you're here. Your wealth of knowledge is endless. Where can our listeners find you online?
So I'll share Instagram and then you can connect to my website from there. So gifting is the proper box, and you can find that at the proper box, one word, no spaces. The proper petal preservation is the proper petal with underscores between each word. So the _ proper _ petal. And that'll take you to my Instagram pages.
Well, that's awesome. You guys, if you're planning a wedding, you definitely, and would you, will you work with people outside of Greenville?
Yeah. So wedding planning is kind of, for closure for me, but the proper petal and the proper box are fully acceptable. I can ship in bouquets just like you did. You ship me your bouquet. We work out the best way to do that one-on-one. And then for gift boxes, same. If we can ship it to your destination outside of Greenville, we can certainly do that. We would work on like a shipping fee estimate and then just get those to you ahead of time. So you can make sure they safely arrive. So yes, they're for everyone.
Yeah. Guys, she's shipped the boxes to my wedding venue, and I shipped her my flower bouquet. So she makes it work. Definitely reach out to her for your boxing needs and your bouquet preservation. Again, thank you so much for joining. This was fantastic. And yeah, and I even learned things today.
Yay. And I want to say thank you for having me and for doing this in general. I mean, everyone plans their wedding differently. There's different scales, and it's just nice to have a resource for them to go out and follow along and get those tips and a guide for if they're choosing to kind of lean to doing it themselves.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thanks, Sydney.
My goal.
Yes.
All right. Well, it was so good to see you.
Good to see you.